by the minister's speeches and of the keynote by Professor Alain Barretz from this morning. Personally, I'm really enthused by the busy life in the exhibition hall. Right next door is reassuring that so many young people are seeking their opportunity to gain knowledge and experience. We are all assembled to push towards Vision 2030. We have an outstanding panel to lead us into discussion. We are going to discuss what the universities of this century might become. In the show catalog, you will find short bios and abstracts of the presentations you will soon listen to. Professor Tula Terry, to my left, has championed the process of merging 3 independent schools of higher learning into a new and innovative university in Finland. And in a very, very short period of time, it has become world-class, if such a thing exists. Professor Dave Goldberg is pioneering artificial intelligence and is a challenger to the traditional paradigm of higher learning in the US. Professor Abdullah Al-Rubaish inserts us into the framework of globalization and the emerging Industry 4.0 environment as it plays out here in the kingdom and beyond. And finally, Professor Alessandra Scagliarini draws the line from the alma mater of Western universities, the University of Bologna in Italy, and to the present. Here in this auditorium, we are all intellectual products of this classical Western university paradigm, one way or the other. It is intriguing for us to remember that it is now more than 200 years ago since this paradigm was seriously changed. It was Wilhelm von Humboldt, who was then Minister of Education in Berlin, the capital of the Kingdom of Prussia. He established the first autonomous research university. And it's also intriguing to remember that his brother, Alexander von Humboldt, realized while visiting the grasslands of Venezuela that mankind forces irreversible changes to nature. He provided the philosophical starting point for the Anthropocene, the era in which the human population alters the biosphere forever. How will universities evolve in the world of Alexander von Humboldt, while nations are struggling to meet the goals set by the United Nations? Do we need to rethink universities all over again? Will they have a role to play, or did they play out their role? This is the question I think I will bring forward to my panelists here this afternoon. And first I will turn to Tula Terry and ask her, what made this change occur in Finland? What was the driving force behind the change?
Thank you. Yeah, I have to take you back about 15 years, to explain what happened, and mainly, there were 3 drivers in Finland why the industries mainly and the government also was keen on looking into reforming the Finnish university system. We are a small country and we are very dependent on exports, mainly by forest industrial products, you know. Nokia was one of the main income in Finland for many, many years until it lost the battle for Apple. And then we are exporting quite a lot to the Russian market, which became actually inaccessible because of some restrictions of the European Union at around that time. And the forest industries also suffered because a lot of the forest industrial production was moving into the southern hemisphere. So almost all of the very important economical prerequisites of Finnish welfare and prosperity were kind of degrading, and that's why the industries basically said that, you know, we want more autonomous, we want stronger universities, because otherwise we cannot stay in Finland, because we are all global companies and we can be anywhere. And because that was such a severe threat, so the government listened to them, and there were these three rectors of the previous universities of technology, business, and design, who decided that, you know, we could actually work for Finland, you know, by merging these three universities, because these university disciplines are such which create the conditions for innovation. So if you have the technological skills, you have the science and technology, you have the design perspective, you know, for creativity, and you have the ability to understand business development. That's how you evolve. And so basically the reform gave the universities in Finland, you know, total autonomy, so we were separated from the state quite completely. It allowed us to evolve, you know, new types of recruitment systems, because we were no longer civil servants, so we could actually decide ourselves on which terms we recruit faculty. And it also was an investment from the government. So while many mergers of universities happen because somebody wants to save money, this was a very big investment from the Finnish government, you know. So the basic funding was raised, you know, by 100 million euros almost annually for 5 years, you know, of the first development. And the other thing that was changing was that, you know, we got a possibility for tax exemption for donations for universities. And so the deal with the government was that, you know, if the private sector or the industry who wanted this reform and who wanted to found Aalto University, if they donated 200 million euros, then the government would donate 500 million. So this was the base capital for the foundation that then became Aalto University. And what this meant for the university was that we still get government funding even at the normal level after this initiation period. But as we all know, especially in Europe at least, you know, the government funding is never stable. There are good periods and then there are worse periods. And this is very difficult for universities, which, as has been said many times already here, that are working on long-term basis. And so since we had this capital, we could use the return on investment not on our daily activities, but we could use it to buffer the fluctuations in the government finances, which actually in the duration, a few years after the beginning of Aalto, you know, were starting to decrease the funding. And so we could continue with our reforms because we had our own money. And so basically what we did substantially, you know, with all these good resources and with the backing from both the industry and the government, we pretty much changed everything in the university. So we said, we are not going to be a merger, we are going to be a new university that has these faculties. And this was a journey that, you know, we said, okay, we need to be excellent, all the universities need to be excellent. So we said, we have 10 years to climb to world class. We were somewhere around, you know, between 300, 400 in the rankings, which are not the end result, but they're still kind of an indicator. And we said 10 years, you know, we have to make the reforms that we can be in we can say that this was worth the investment. We invested very much in interdisciplinary work, obviously. We focused our activities quite severely because we said we are a small university in a small country, so we can't do everything. And so we pretty much decided that we are going to focus all our recruitments in the university for 4 different areas. And the other thing we did was that, you know, with all this extra funding that we got, you know, we didn't recruit a single more professor, but we made sure that all professors had good basic funding to do the research, you know, that they wanted to do. This is another part of the autonomy, that, you know, you recruit the best people in the world, far as we could see in our situation, and then you let them do what they want. And the other side of it is, that I used to say to my professors that, I'm never going to tell you what you should do, but I am going to ask you that you do it well. And so we put quite strong requirements for performance, as did the Finnish, also the government. So basically Finland has now maybe the most result-based funding for universities, with indicators for research quality and education quality and internationalization and industrial collaboration and things like that. And a lot of people say that incentives don't work in universities, but in our university they did work. And it kind of changed the culture of the university to be very goal-oriented and very ambitious. And I think, the other thing, when you are asking, if universities have lived their duration or whatever, I don't think so, because we can use digital learning methods and things like that. I see it more like an advanced book, but I'm a great believer in human interaction, and I think that one of the things why we succeeded in doing this transformation is also because we were able to build a community with shared values and shared goals and ambition. And one of the goals that, as the leadership team, what we put in front of ourselves, was that we said, in 10 years, we want the professors and students to go out of this university proud of what they have achieved, proud of being part of this community. And I think we got very close to that.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll go right away to Dr. Goldberg. Your critique of the university has often been strident. What are the things you actually appreciate or admire from universities?
Yeah, so I need to distinguish myself from the august group here on the stage. I'm maybe the one person who hasn't been at the rector level or president level, and my experiences in the university were in the love of research and the love of teaching as an artificial intelligence professor at the University of Illinois, and then as the founder of an incubator for educational change called iFoundry, the Illinois Foundry for Innovation and Engineering Education, that moved a very resistant culture. So we have examples on stage of top-down leadership. There's bottom-up. I've done bottom-up, and I've also done middle-out kinds of leadership. And so one of the things I appreciate about the university is the freedom to use your mind in ways like that. But I'm also maybe alone on the stage in the sense that I'm not as optimistic as our morning speaker, and I'm not as optimistic as the speaker that we just heard or the ones that we're going to hear. And this comes from my experience both in iFoundry and from wandering the planet as a consultant and a leadership coach. I took training as a leadership coach at Georgetown, and I've gone out into the world to try to help schools in South America, in the Middle East, in Asia, and North America and Europe as well. And one of the things I've found is how very hard it is to make the real kinds of transformative changes that we need. And I was so glad to hear the beginning remarks about the opening of the university several hundred years ago in the Humboldt experience. And yes, that was the founding of the operating system of the university. Don Schoen at MIT called that way of thinking about using knowledge as, he called it technical rationality. And so the idea back then was to accumulate more and more well-vetted knowledge. And the idea of practice under that model is to merely apply well-vetted knowledge. Schoen also said that that's actually, if you watch practitioners out in the world, that's not what they do. Practitioners out in the world have reflection in action and conversation in action that actually is how they figure out how to both apply the theories that exist, but also to figure out what the particular problem is and really to solve it. My sense is that the operating system of the university is broken in the following way. And actually we have a representative from the University of Bologna. So 1088, the university was founded as an assembly of experts. And it's continued to this day with the modifications a couple hundred years ago. But here's the problem. What has the web done to expertise? Well, we've seen what's happened in the way of MOOCs. Teaching is a commodity now. You can get better lectures online than, unfortunately, many of us in this room for free or for no or very low cost. And then people say, well, Dave, what about research? Well, 14-year-olds with laptops can read the same papers as any expert. So an economist would say it this way, it would say that returns to expertise have diminished. But that's the fundamental operating system of these institutions called universities. So if returns to expertise are diminished, and frankly, we don't do a very good job of teaching reflection and action, what's going to happen? Well, in my country, there's a television show called The Walking Dead, and it's about zombies that kind of walk around. They've lost their soul. I think the university has lost its soul, is losing it, and by the way, the robots and AI are coming, and we're going to lose it even more. I think there's a way to regain it. I think Don Schoen had it right in 1983, but I'm also not optimistic that we actually can make the changes, because that too is a real practical problem, and we're merely good at theory. So how we're actually going to convert over to a system that doesn't depend on what we've been good at seems to me to be culturally impossible. And I think that's the real challenge that I'd like to pose to my colleagues on stage.
Thank you very much, Dave. I guess we're all getting small bits and pieces that we can reuse in the discussion that will soon follow. And you will all be invited to take part in that. But after the brief introduction of the four panelists, we will have a discussion among the panelists, and then we will open the floor and have ample time for discussion with the floor. So now I will turn to President Al-Obaish, and I'm very, very interested in hearing you explaining a little bit more how your analogy to Industry 4.0 will play. Which of the features from Industry 4.0 fits the university sector and which will not? So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Loratz, and I would like also to acknowledge the panelists and thank also the organizing committee for inviting me to be a member of this panel. I think the universities, to stay relevant, competitive, and attractive, must embark on major transformation initiatives. And I think the transformation or the change is not is inevitable worldwide. And for us in Saudi Arabia, I think the universities are not an exception. In fact, the universities, Saudi University, and the transformation is the need of the hour in view of the ambitious leadership vision and also the National Transformation Program. Now, nobody disputes the fact that education is central for economic development and also the key for social inclusions and for productivity. Education is changing like anything else in this world, and in fact is changing at a scale and a speed which is unprecedented at all. And the reason for this change is primarily, I think, two main factors. The rapid advancement in information communication technology, as well as the globalization. And I think these two factors have fused with each other to the extent that each one is affecting the other right now. So the more advancement we have in information technology, the more intense is the globalization, to the fact that each one of these two is working as a catalyst right now, and both are working synergistically to create this intense globalizations. Now, as a result of this, you have mass migration of workers. You do have also circulation of ideas. You have a greater exposure to cultures. And what this have created, it definitely affected here in Saudi and anywhere else, the local practices and policies. And as a result of this, the knowledge right now is being produced and even disseminated and delivered not as a product or as a service, but rather as a commodity. Again, this sets challenges to the higher education system to meet this issue. Now, the challenges are primarily centered around the students and around the graduates. In order for the higher education to meet these challenges, then transformation has to occur in all various domains of the university. And these will be probably teaching and learning, will be governance and administrations, there will be issues related to research and development, and also to knowledge delivery. So Saudi University, for quite a while, they've been expanding, increasing in number, expanding in terms of academic programs, meeting the national commitments towards the community they serve. But right now, they probably should move to produce a quality kind of services, to also enroll the right mix of inputs, which will produce the best return in particular. This is around the graduates. And research and studies have shown that the single most important things which will probably create a university-ready graduate who will meet the rapidly changing workforce requirements is probably project-based learning, as well as the curriculum which is being designed with industrial-driven curriculum. So I think these two issues ought to be considered by Saudi University. And in fact, some of the GRAMs have already adapted these strategies of project-based learning, which will have a significant impact at the end on the products. Sure.
Thank you very much. And now, finally, Vice Rector Scardiarini. What do you think? What would universities become? We have this foundation of, some people call it the learned republic, where brains meet and exchange, but I think we heard from Dave that we don't need that anymore. We can let the robots meet and exchange ideas. So how do you see the situation?
As Dave anticipated, I'm a bit more optimistic. And I think that the universities have a reason to be now and in the future. I think that now we are facing a very challenging time because society is changing very fast. So the universities now are placed in society that are changing very fast due to migration, to internationalization. But I think in this moment it's very important that university and higher education becomes more and more spaces for citizens. And I think that the society needs university and university needs society. As you will know, University of Bologna was funded many years ago, centuries ago, and was funded because of a social need, because it was funded by students that needs to be taught by very important professors all over Europe. And I think that being so old, so ancient, I must say, it is important that we always rethink what we want to be. And I think that having the possibility, like here, to exchange with very diverse university setting is very important because it's a chance to redesign our future, but also discuss about our values. Tula mentioned about autonomy, but also freedom it's something that is very important and we cannot take it for granted. And so university needs to protect freedom. And also now I think that another value that it is very important and should guide our future strategy is diversity. So David mentioned that website disrupted our system and everybody have access to science and to education through MOOCs. But it's important that because we are facing this very, very fast-changing environment, we try to take diversity as a value and take this as an opportunity to be more and more concrete towards the needs of society. Transferring knowledge, but also educating citizens after graduation. Lifelong learning is something that should be there, but it should be shaped based on the needs of society. I'm just a bit critical about the fact that many of these activities are in fact included in the third mission of university, that is not just technology transfer, but is also social engagement. And social engagement is something that is not quite evaluated by rankings or quality assurance, and this may cause a bit of reduced enthusiasm inside universities going toward these kind of activities that are so important for society, but because they are not able to be reduced in number, sometimes they are not really evaluated. So the enthusiasm toward these activities that are so important sometimes have the risk to be underrepresented or not a priority inside a university. I think that it is very important now to embed as much as we can research into education and try to let our students to learn about inquiry and try to I know that critical thinking is something that is quite abused as a concept, but it's very important because we should overcome the disciplines and try to promote a multidisciplinary way of learning if we want to give a contribution to sustainable development goals, which are, as we know, goals that cannot be reached in just one way, but in a systematic, holistic way. And this is a challenge, but also a great chance for university. And I think that we don't have to be so negative, but we should be very open. And I think the only thing is try to advocate to policymakers and try to push a change on that. I think the Bologna process highly contributed not only in the job placement, so what was the first reason to have the 3-year and then plus master, but I think the main result that we had was a more flexible program for students that can choose or change their curriculum. And this is very important, especially now that we have a very diverse environment to manage. So I'm optimistic anyway.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we should all be optimistic on behalf of the future, because there's one thing we know, and that is the future is coming. But what about the universities within that future? I think we can foresee that the number of post-secondary students will increase dramatically, and the number of students who attend university will continue to increase. What different societies will do with the lifelong learning challenge is we don't know. But if lifelong learners will, one way or the other, attend universities, then we are seeing another doubling in terms of capacity. So from my point of view, it's a great fortune that ICT has come into play and that the World Wide Web exists. But I still want to also say that while I was the rector of a relatively large university of 45,000 students, half of them in graduate school, we had more students away from campus than on campus. Beyond the 45,000, we had maybe 80,000 lifelong learners, and beyond that, distant students. And how do you deal with that? Could we have gone into distance education altogether, change the programs into MOOCs? And I would say no, because there's one thing that the World Wide Web and robots do not have, and that is blood. Yeah. And if you know campus life, sometimes from a campus university you get very good results even though the program is lousy. That is when the university is capable of recruiting very good brains. It's hard to destroy good brains. You can stimulate them, but it is when human brains interact with other human brains that something happens.
Yes.
And so in a way, my point is that the traditional campus university will be here in the future, and those that will become world-class, those campus universities that will integrate the traditional way with new ways. But how do you see it? This is just my take. You can all jump in and take the word as Tula.
Yeah, I agree completely with this idea, because I think that, one of the things in education, and it depends on what level of education we're talking about, whether we're talking about the upgrading of a degree or if we need a special skill or something like that. But when we're talking about the entire path, from bachelor to master to particularly to doctor, I think it is something that, we depend on. I mean, we have seen many fantastic role models in the different films that we have been looking at today and yesterday. And I think that, we need to relate to someone who's done it somehow. And that applies to education such as it does to leadership of countries or sports or whatever. And I think that, I think the robotics and the AI is going to be extremely important for science actually, because of the algorithms that can actually produce and process incredible amounts of data. But I'm not sure in the very close future that they are going to make all of the decisions, especially the ethical ones. And I think that, just like you say, that, what is so rewarding, it's one of the reasons why Aalto succeeded was because we were able to build a community. And one of the main steps, was actually that we built a campus together. So we had a home, where we could all feel that this is our place, this is where we can exchange our ideas. And we invite everyone there, who has something to do with the university. So we had also the industry on campus, we said the industry is allowed to come to the open spaces, where we share everything. And then if they want to do something in secret, they have to go to the floor 2 or floor 3. But there was a domain, where we could all interact, with different disciplines, with different backgrounds. We even have schools now in the campus. So there are school students, using the same restaurants and sports facilities as the university. So I think that this element is very difficult to robotize.
So I think you have a couple of advocates for campus, but I would also be an advocate for maybe we shouldn't have as many professors on campus. Maybe we should use the strategy from Industry 4.0 to recruit the professors right on time from wherever they are, and expose students wherever they are to these professors.
It's already happening. So we have the rise of lots of for-profit schools and people, and so Tula was just saying about working with someone with experience. Well, a lot of times the faculty member in the classroom doesn't have experience, but the person that you hire on the outside does have experience. But I think I agree with the basic point of what I was saying was to not celebrate that the robots are coming, but to say that if the university is to be saved, we're going to save it by thinking deeply about what it means to be uniquely human in the face of what robots can't do. There isn't a robot on the planet yet that is intentional, even intentional to the extent of a bird or a squirrel. And so other animals are intentional and have goals and desires and things like that. But that means that we have to shift from technical rationality to being more in touch with what it means to be deeply human. And we have to deal with emotional intelligence. In coaching, there's this notion of somatic coaching where you coach people from body. A lot of it draws from theater and the martial arts. But if you think about it, leadership of humans is an embodied sport. Where's that in our universities? We teach leadership theory. We do not teach leadership as a practice. And so it seems to me that the university of the future, if there is to be one, will be a more human place, but we're not set up to do that.
Yes. I had another thought. Why is it that in universities, the researchers, the professors, when they conduct their research, they work very often in global teams, people that are scattered across the globe, while when they are teaching, they are very local, the same people. Why is that? Can we do something to that? Could we globalize the educational part of the universities? Should we?
I just wanted to make a comment. It's true that the ICT has influenced teaching in the universities and replacing the traditional ways of delivering the knowledge. But I think even with these additions through the Industry 4.0, like robots and other modalities, the university environment still has to be preserved. And I think there are issues that you cannot develop in the students except within the university community. The college experience, you cannot get it by using, of course, the technology alone. Building certain skill, communication skills and others, you cannot develop these things by using technology alone. So it will probably reach to a stage that will be definitely a mix of human plus the AI or the development in technology, and also to fuse with each other in order to shape the graduates of the university. Yes.
Yeah, technology, I think offers a wide possibility to improve our way of teaching, but I'm a bit sure that university will be a human experience anyway. So people, in internationalization, we know how much a student gains when he has an experience abroad. And this is because it's not just having concepts or knowledge from a certain course for credit, but it's a human experience in another country, in another city, with other people. And this is also very important for local students that don't move, because having international student it's another time a human experience. So, for example, University of Bologna, when we thought about transnational branch, we were thinking, okay, so we can do it by virtual education. But this is not what we want to do. We can use technology. I think technology it's a rich opportunity, because when you do your lectures and you can show something that you cannot really explain by just your voice, it's very important. But you cannot really overcome this. This is very important. I think student needs to have a human experience. I was discussing with a colleague yesterday about the experience of their student in Erasmus, and they tend to be more active when they go out of the university and they graduate, and they find a job easily than the others because they gain independence, they gain other skills that are not really discipline related. But I take your question about why we are globalized when we do research, but when we do lecturing, we are all alone in our classroom. Well, yes, it is. It can be, but we have a lot of mobility also for staff and so having visiting professor from time to time opens the possibility of sharing your lectures with other experts. In Europe now we are experiencing these European alliances that want to launch a different environment that will overcome the European higher education area way of working, like building a network of university where a student feels like home in a different location and sharing the stuff. It is very difficult because we have rules, national rules, and we know that working together as if we were one, it's very, very difficult, but we can do it. Not easy, but we can do it. And the students are so enthusiastic about being a part of such an environment. So we need time because it's very different from before and it's changing very, very rapidly. If I compare myself, what I do in my daily life as a lecturer at the university, I think my job is very different from my professor, my former professor. They were very traditional. Now you can include in your lectures something that is new, offering them maybe two, 3 lectures from your colleague that is maybe your mate in research, and we can do it. It's not easy, but I think there are many initiatives running that can improve also lecturing and being global when we do teaching and education.
I think there's something more to it. I do think that on the research side, researchers exchange knowledge, at least when we talk about basic research. You know something, I know something else, and if we add it, we know a little bit more, both of us know how to do things and stuff like that. So it's like an exchange economy, whereas in education, the economy is very different. In some countries, it's actually students pay full and sometimes more than full price. And in other countries, students don't pay or pay less than full price. So it's another kind of economy. It's a monetary economy on the educational side that I think creates some difficulties for the same kind of exchange. Some universities will probably try to sell a MOOCs program, and others would give away or open their classrooms for students from other systems. So there's a difference in the economy of the two sides, I think. Tula.
I'm thinking that it's not anymore, I mean, at least it doesn't have to be so that, the teachers are alone in the classroom, because you have, I mean, that's where the technology helps, You can have your colleague, from New York, to speak at the same time as you are giving your lecture, and you can have a conversation. I mean, we had in Aalto, we had this workshop type of learning environment, which was called the Design Factory, and they had continuous contact, with 8 laboratories around the world. And when one of them was going to bed, the other one was coming, and they had a little job discussion in between. The other thing is that, you have to think about, to future-proof universities, you have to think about what the community is. And it's not a club of professors anymore, but it is actually an environment where you have students, you will have, executives in residence. I agree completely that, we need to teach the students also other than the theory. And we can have, industries, I mean, on site as we had, and they are not like just benefiting from the university knowledge, but they're also contributing. And the thing is that when you think about these kind of strategic partnerships with industries, it's not a one-way street, as is not teaching either anymore. So the industries actually have a lot of inside information that they don't share with anyone, but they might share it with you if you are their strategic partner. And it's the same thing what we found with the students. We had very, very entrepreneurial students. It was because we let them try their wings, when everybody thought that they're not quite ready yet. And so when professors teach, and I think all the professors that do high-level research, they have an obligation to share that with the students. What they get from the students, is a whole new perspective of what future is. It's difficult at this age to imagine what's going to happen in 30 years, and they can predict it much better than we can. So I think my experience of teaching is no longer that it's a lonely business for professors.
Dave?
This issue of economics is really important, and a lot of it has to do with the perception of students students or whoever's paying as to whether they're getting value. So just a couple of examples. My younger son just went to a coding school for 13 weeks and got a certificate and is now making 40% more than he did before. He didn't go to a university, it was a nonprofit coding school. If you look at, actually my older son went to a regular university but online for 2 years and got a Bachelor of Science in computer science. So there are all kinds of options, and they have costs associated with them. But to your point about faculty members exchanging knowledge for fun or because they're learning new things, talked to my young friend in Peru who started one of the first maker spaces there, where people learn for no credit, but they learn lots of stuff and they organize things on their own. Or the example of Brazil Junior, where student enterprises are set up outside of the university, and the junior enterprise movement generally, where students teach themselves how to be practical in the world. Their professors think it's a waste of their time, and yet the companies in those countries hire kids from Brazil Junior and junior enterprise in a privileged kind of way. And I think this issue, this also goes to the issue of quality. I was just in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia last week, and so I met with some students, and I said, I posed a provocative prompt. I said, professors today are not. And here's some of what they said. Professors today are not teaching for the future. Professors for the day are not innovative. Professors today are not motivating. Professors today are not good teachers at all. Professors today are not passionate. Professors today are not preparing their lectures well. Professors today are not willing to change. Professors today are not leaders. Professors today are not listening. Professors today are not good speakers. And I dare say that I could do that in any number of countries and get a similar response. So the perception, we better deliver a better product if we're going to continue to charge as much, but we also need to get the cost of the product down.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to add something because Tula was mentioning industry, which is very important, but I would also mention civil society and other actors in society that can contribute to improve our teaching and education. For example, we have just launched a credit mobility that is based on cooperation and development at an international level with NGOs. So the professor recognized this credit because the students go abroad with NGOs, they do their job there, that can be for a thesis or for a research program, and we recognize this credit because we think that when students are exposed to very different environment and they have the possibility to use their knowledge, but also to develop skills that may be very different in different environment, it's something that will improve your own teaching when they come back and they tell to the class what happened there and what was their experience. So I think that we have many opportunities to have to improve our way of teaching that is different from before. We have also to take into consideration that alumni have a role in our daily life, and they can be very important actors to put some practical practical things in our courses, just to give them, to the students an idea of what happens in the job market, in the society. So we need, as professors, to be open to what is happening. So yes, I listen to the list of what we are not, but I think that if we are open to what is happening with eyes wide open and ears wide open, we can take the chance to pick up very interesting collaboration outside.
Yeah, just my comment regarding these things you mentioned by the students. And I think the reason for this is because the research part of the university function has been so much emphasized at the expense of the teaching function. Now, when you ask any faculty member in the world, he will tell you that ask him about his teaching load and ask him about his research opportunity. He, all the time, always, he will, emphasize the fact that he's not taking enough teaching opportunities and he was overloaded with the teaching. But this is not the case, and I think the main function is primarily teaching, and research it comes, but teaching has to be equal to research or even more than that.
I think we still have a couple of minutes for the panel to discuss, and I would like maybe to collect some keywords about the coming university or the university of the 21st century. What would be the keywords for it? In the beginning, we heard universities must be autonomous. So autonomous in, I guess, many aspects of the word. It's one keyword. I will offer one more. I have several more. But you just mentioned functions. So what balance among functions? And I guess we have more than 2 functions. What else should we put? So balance among functions.
Yeah, between the teaching function and between research function as well.
Yes.
I think it has to be balanced, and I don't think, I do not think that the faculty members should be accredited for what he does in research, but at the same time, he should definitely be accredited what he does in teaching as well. Because at the end of the day, if you are looking for a graduate who is ready to go to workforce, it's the teaching process which will shape him, not the research process. So with all the requirements of the labor force, critical thinking and communication, connecting with the others, it's the teaching part which will affect him. So what I think a faculty member has to be accredited in the same weight and same magnitude as of that of the research.
Dave and Tula.
I just want to make an observation. All the important keywords come in pairs, as was just mentioned, and they're opposites. And in the literature of coaching, they're called polarities. So which is better, to inhale or exhale? To live, we need both. Which is better, to teach or do research? In universities, we need both. The problem of changing a university is a problem of polarity management. Which is better? Should we respect tradition or should we make change? We actually need both. And so I just want to observe that one way to think about these important keywords is to pair them up with their opposites and then think about how we get the best of both worlds in the current environment.
Tula?
No, the thing is about this autonomy is controversial in the sense that, all universities that I know of, always want more resources and more autonomy. And I think that, we've seen it over and over again, not the least in Finland, where the government was pouring money on universities for 10 years and the quality was not going up. And that's why we had this reform, which actually put some pressure on the university to also perform. And you can say that, university business is a long-term business. And that's true, but if you do things right, if the funding is long-term, I mean, you can always say to your so-called customers or partners that we didn't start yesterday. So we have been, the universities have been, 10 or 100 years old, If they do things well, they will be continuously spinning new knowledge which can be exploited. So every time that the problem arises, we don't start from scratch. And I think the responsibility as a kind of a pair for the autonomy is a very, very good word. And I think the other word, I like very much, is we have to be collaborative, we have to be deep, but we have to be able to share. And that's why I like this idea of a community. A university is no longer for only professors and students, but it's a community of people who can contribute in different ways into the common cause.
So maybe I like to provoke a little bit. That's because of my ancestry. Danes used to be Vikings 1,000 years ago. And we are working hard on exercising the few genes we have for diplomacy, but they are sometimes difficult to find. So the opposite of management is mismanagement. And the opposite of less structure is more structure. And the opposite of younger is older. What's the opposite of dynamic? I think it's a good exercise to think about these opposites. I guess we all realize that we need less structure in order to cross-fertilize between disciplines, like you did in Aalto University. And we also know that in the future, breakthroughs are probably coming between disciplines. That calls for less structure or something to overcome structure. Maybe fewer faculties, fewer departments. In the communities, maybe if in some communities, think about innovation hubs on the globe. These are communities. Boston, to take one place, is a community of innovation. It has many institutions. Should our friends in Massachusetts or the US have so many institutions, or are institutions just a nuisance? Do institutions as such form barriers to this exchange of between the human beings that create innovation? I'm just asking questions to you, but I think we should think about management. We don't want mismanagement. We want autonomy, but we don't know that governments or whoever fund universities, they want to have a say. So autonomous and good management, what is that? So I get more and more questions into my head, but I do think that universities are the core of the traditional campus university, will be the core of the future, the universities of the future, provided that we are able of opening up these traditional communities to the wider community. One final round here, and then we will open for interaction and questions from the floor. Dave.
Yeah, so I just, you pushed one of my hot buttons when you said institutions and you questioned the need for them, and that's actually one of the, so there's this nice, Ronald Coase just passed away, and he got a Nobel Prize in economics for his work on transaction costs, and he said that, well, why do organizations become big, and why do we form institutions at all? And his argument was that we form institutions because the costs of interacting in the free market are not free. So one of the things that's happened in the web is the web has reduced all kinds of transaction costs, and so lots of things that used to require a lot of bigger organizations, people can now stick to their core competence. The other thing that's happened is we see a lot of people getting bigger. The Googles of the world get bigger, and there the return to network scale is increasing. So as they have more people that use their product, it's more valuable. So there are I call them from the Bible story of Goliath. You have network Goliaths and you have core competence Davids in the world that we live in, and that's different. That's very different, and it's also one way to think about universities as institutions and our own core competences. But it's also a way to think about the other kinds of institutions that are going to arise and compete with us. But we have to think differently economically, is the point that I wanted to make, and it connected directly to the point you were making about, well, these institutions, don't they get in the way? The answer right now is yes, because they were designed in the past.
Dula?
I think, it's quite important, to think about, you talk about management, I talk about governance, whichever word you was to, maybe leadership is the best word, but what happened in Finland is that we got autonomy from the government, so the government is no longer micromanaging what the university is doing. So we have these missions that we have to fulfill, and we have these indicators, that we get more money if we do it well. But then what happens internally, is that the big change was that we could have an external board. And that's something that, most universities in Europe don't have, because the faculty wants to have also a say. So basically the university management is sitting between the government and the faculty. And that is not the way to get good reforms done, You can't vote for finishing some department or merging the university. You have to have leadership. And that's basically what we got, with an external board where everybody was so high expert. We had a Nobel Prize winner, we had CEOs of big companies and so on. Everybody had a PhD. So you have to have a board which is credible in a university environment, but they have to have a mandate actually to make strategic decisions. And then they have to be able to give the university leadership a mandate to do all the operative decisions which are necessary. And the thing is that, people have a very broad understanding of academic freedom in European universities. So they think every decision in university has to do with academic leadership. And of course, it's the intellectual freedom that you have, where you sit or, these kind of things, they should be management decisions. So how do you organize the university services or digitalization and things like that? That's something that the management should take care of and should be allowed to take care of. So I think governance is very important, but I'm saying that, even the fact that you say that your universities are free from the government control, they can still be dependent on the control by the faculty, which is not much better, when you have to make big changes.
May I add something?
Alexandra?
Okay, I'm going back to your keywords because I think that university in the future should be also inclusive and fair. And because I was thinking about what you have said before, because the student pay, you have to be there and teach them in a proper way, yes. But education is also a right for the people that cannot afford paying university, and university should be open to that. And this is very important because especially in particular countries like Africa, the population is growing and the number of young people that needs education is growing a lot more than in Europe and in other parts of the world. And sometimes these people do not have the possibility to pay for education, but we are there also for these people. So I think inclusion and fairness in this is very important. I think that universities should be accountable for national rules, and so we need to gain certain results according to indicators, but it's in the end of good leaders at the university to give room also to the thing that cannot be counted, such as the activities for the benefit of society, that is not only technology transfer, patenting, and opening startup or spin-off, is also organizing something in a museum or a cultural fair for the population. So this is not something that can be reduced to a number, but a good leader at the university must include these activities, because we don't have to be too far from the community in which we operate. And because now we operate locally, but also globally, our eyes need to be very open on that. So it is in the hand of good leaders to try to be accountable, to go and try to reach the good result, but leave some room, some budget to the things that need. Just they spend money, but they don't gain so much, except the trust of the community in which we operate. This is very important because science is very sometimes too far, is perceived as far from the community, and we faced big problems when we think about vaccines or things like that. We were claiming a lot about the effectiveness of these drugs, but anyway, the people were informing themselves on the web and trying to get fake information. So we need to be there, and we need to go down from the ivory tower to talk with the people, and the leaders must leave room for that.
Abdullah, if I...
Oh, and I agree with what was said, but I think the engagement with the community and also the co-curricular activities, the co-curricular activities, these are important not to save the community alone, but also to shape the skills of the graduate as well. I mean, much of these that you want to develop, you cannot develop these in the lecture hall. So students has to be engaged with some sort of work in and out of the classroom and on campus and in the community in order, of course, to become ready to the workforce. But definitely social engagement is a very fundamental part of the university function, sure.
Now we will open the floor for discussion. I just wanted to share one thought I got from the last round. Who should we be accountable to? It was easy in the past because there was one source of income from government, so there was accountability towards government. Then came society, maybe to families, if families paid. But the knowledge system is becoming increasingly global. So it's not so clear who benefits from which activity. Look at the big IT companies. I would claim they benefit greatly from investments done around the globe. And the profit is not shared around the globe. And we don't know really how to deal with globalization in a knowledge system, as far as I see it. Even in small continents such as Europe, we would see some countries benefit from investment in higher education in other countries. It's not a balanced exchange of human capital. So we have a lot of issues to think about. And no, I'm not coming with the solutions now. So the floor is open. You can ask questions to anybody in the panel, please. If I may ask you, just briefly say your name and affiliation.
Microphone.
First, do we have a microphone somewhere?
Yeah, there's a woman with the 6 up there.
Yeah.
Has a microphone.
We're just waiting for the microphone on the first row here.
Thank you very much for the distinguished panelists. My name is Walid al-Somali from the Saudi Arabian National Oil Company, Saudi Aramco. I have a brief, very short comment and a question for the distinguished panelists. The brief comment is that we in industry, and this applies to all major corporations around the world, we are very much interested for academic institutions to collaborate with us in the area of Fourth Industrial Revolution and the digital transformation that are taking place. His Excellency the Minister today, Minister of Education, referenced to the importance of IR 4.0. His Excellency Dr. Abdullah Rabish also highlighted in his discussion about the importance of this. We in industry, we would like to align our research, innovation, collaboration with universities in areas like artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, cloud computing, cyber, additive manufacturing, all the derivatives of IR 4.0. The question that I have for the distinguished panelists, how academic, and this applies at least in this part of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, how best, and this is something we in industry are very much interested in, how academic institutions in this part of the world activate the third important pillar of their missions, which is societal engagement or community service. Now, recently, the Times Higher Education Index released the first ranking, despite the controversy surrounding rankings, on impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations sent to the international community to achieve by 2030. 3 Saudi universities were ranked, I think King Abdulaziz University, King Saud University, as well as I think Al Faisal University. Good step. How universities in the Middle East would give more attention to these important goals that even the kingdom is committed to achieve. And the Ministry of Planning just last year published a report that signifies the progress of the country in attaining these 17 important development goals. How best we embed these goals in the fabric of the learning experience of students and the research agenda of the institution as a whole. Thank you very much.
Who would like to answer? Tula first.
I can start. I think it's a very complex issue for universities. How you interact with industries, and I mean, my country, it was in the 80s. When it was almost considered forbidden. And nowadays, we are much more open in industrial collaborations, and I think that the important thing for industries to understand when they approach universities that we are not at our best to solve your everyday problems. We are much better to solve your future problems together with you, and so that's why we started developing these strategic partnerships where we said the time frame is about 10 years. And when you start working with technology-intensive companies with a time frame of 10 years, then you're actually really boosting innovation. If you want short-term help, it's really good to do it with student projects, so you can have master students, little bit more advanced students, who are supervised by the professors. And then, if they are successful in solving your challenges, you also have the workforce to come with it. But it's really important, to sort of think about, what kind of help. And I think, there are research institutes that are better, at least in Europe, to do commissioned work. So universities are, we are long-term institutions. We can do it, but we are not at our best for that. So strategic partnerships, and I think, we in Scandinavia, in Sweden, in Europe actually nowadays, this is the way the funding is going, to support these long-term strategic partnerships. The good thing about them is also that, when you design them well, you can have these partnerships, with large companies, but you can include smaller companies, who can be suppliers, for instance, for the larger company, which will also help them to increase their level of competencies. But it is a complex issue on both sides, but it's worthwhile to build these bridges.
Alessandra?
Yeah, can I add something? Yeah. Okay, so on the interaction with industry, I think it's very important. As I said, we need to be very open to what happens outside. As University of Bologna, for example, we have main activities with the small, medium enterprises of the area. We launched different masters with local industries. One is an international one with Lamborghini, Ferrari, Maserati, and other companies that are all in our region. And this is because they need expertise graduates to work in their firm, and this is very important. But they need also research, as you said, so it is very important also to share PhD programs with industries if we want to make the difference, because universities, as I said, are not there just for themselves, but also to increase the welfare of the communities in which they operate. When we go to SDG is another very important question, and I think that going to our reality, University of Bologna is monitoring all the activities that we are doing regarding the 17th Sustainable Development Goal. We have a report on that, and so we monitor education, research, and third mission related to what we do for each of these SDG. And we also are part of a global network that was launched by IAU, it's Higher Education for Sustainable Development. And this partnership is very, very important because universities from all over the world compare their activities and their strategies related to sustainable development. But I have to admit that if sustainable development goals are not a priority at a government level, it is very difficult for a university to make a difference in educating the future leaders in this field. Because we discussed a lot and with IAU, and it was amazing to see what Norway, for example, is doing on that. Their government is very committed, so also their program at the university are very flexible to be very concrete in educating the future leaders for sustainable development. If your rules for accreditation, for example, are very strict, it's very difficult to make the difference because sustainable development is not working to one each, but you have to reach them all if you want to go to 2030 in a successful way. So I think that university can do a lot on that, but it needs the help of the central government that has to be very, very committed on that. And we have good examples all over the world where this is the fact. And we can take good examples and share with them good practices.
Thank you. There was a question up there, and then it's you afterwards. There was one question up there? Okay, then it's you. Yeah. No, here. Yeah. I don't know the name.
Hi, this is Dr. Roish Darraweli. Thank you all for coming here to Saudi Arabia and for this fruitful discussion. Actually, my discussion is about the title, Rethinking. Okay, when you rethink, is it a problem-oriented approach or a goal-oriented approach? Because if it's a goal, this is a goal I need to deliver, and how can I know that I'm delivering this goal? If it is a problem, then I need a solution. This is one thing, but I think it stems from an identity issue. When I think about the first and the second and the third mission of the university, can I be the three at one, or can I be only one or all three together? Yeah. Yes, I think you might can, but you need quantum physics or superpositioning to do it. So I think unclarity in the mission creeps into our institutions. This is one thing. And about the technology and the answers and the data Professor Goldberg provided, I think they reflect this identity issue because students are getting something else. This is not the things they are looking for from the university. This is one thing. The other thing about actually our perception. If you say digital transformation, everyone thinks the key word is digital, where actually it is transformation. This is one thing. Another thing, our perception about the university. We think about the outputs. How many research papers, how many engineers, lawyers, teachers they can produce. But I think we should think about the social impact, as you said, about the sustainable development goals. I think there are 11, based on the methodology, not 17, because every society is different. That's why there are 11, because every society is different. So the Saudi university should not be the same as an American university. We operate, yes, locally. It's okay to operate globally. So the question is, could we, or would I, or could I? Thank you.
Okay. One answer, and then we take another question.
So I just wanted to make a couple comments. So first of all, the title, Rethinking. So one of the things that's fun for me is, as a regular professor, being able to poke a couple of presidents and a rector or two. So it's kind of fun to do that. And I said, well, if we don't give them their money's worth, we will be rehashing the university. But I think your point has a serious question at the bottom of it, and this is not a theoretical exercise. If we're doing this, it's about remaking the university, but there's the rub. We are not makers at the university, we are thinkers. And so there's the problem. That was my opening remarks were about how can a bunch of thinkers and theoreticians actually remake something, and how do we become more practical? That leads me to, actually sometimes I turn to Yogi Berra, the former manager of the New York Yankees, sometimes says interesting things. I think he's got it right on this one. He says, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And in order for the university to remake itself, it's got to take practice more seriously. But there's the problem. We think practice is low class, we think it's low status, and we're not going to do it. And so that's why I said I was pessimistic. But I think that's exactly where we have to go if we're going to remake the university and have better outcomes for our students. And finally, on our students, their whole lives have had these devices where they have a choice to watch or not watch, to click this link or not click that link. And they're sitting in classes where they can't click a link and make that professor go away. That's part of the huge mismatch. Millennials are different, and we need to think really differently about the environment they've been in versus the environment we're providing them.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, and greetings to all of the panel presenters. Thank you so much for your informative presentation. This is Ms. Tahira Hoke from Prince Sultan University, and my comment is related to Prince Sultan University. We actually have our strategic plan aligned with the sustainability development goals, and we're also engaged in IAU activities. So we really do appreciate the Kingdom's effort, the Kingdom's Vision 2030, and we attempt to try to make sure that our faculty as well as our students are engaged with this discussion annually. The comment I wanted to, or question if you will, I wanted to note in addition to the discussion on opposites is academic freedom versus standardization, human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. Are they truly opposites, or should we think about how there are opportunities and they empower each other? I would like to know from the panelists, how can we systematically protect the academic freedom of our faculty members, as well as ensure faculty members are prepared to embrace the technology of the day, whether it's artificial intelligence or Bitcoin technology, whatever is going to come that we are not discussing today, but comes in 10 years. How can we make sure our faculty are prepared, as well as our students prepared to deal with and to learn something that we're not even discussing today?
Anybody wants to comment? Or we add one more question and then we take a round of answers. Okay. I'll get you over there. The gentleman on the 5th row, yes.
I think the points were raised very useful and broad in a sense. My name is Omar Al-Suwailim from King Fahd University of Petroleum Minerals. One of the main important things that we need to consider, although we talk about autonomy, I think governance and its prospective model has to be revisited. So universities, and if they don't transform, they will default. That's a statement that we have to consider and take an action in it. So when we talk about the governance, talk about leadership, selection of leadership, whether it is presidents or board of trustees or board of regents, as well as the accountability model for those universities, how it can be remodeled in a very effective way. And then we talked about the skills of not the student, the skills of the faculty, how the faculty becomes aligned with the future skills of the student. The students now is getting ahead of what faculty are doing, as we just mentioned from our speakers. And then the third dimension is how can we revisit the program in a borderless manner. So our program has to be not just multidisciplinarily, but also has to be borderless in its construction. So to do this, I think there is a lot of challenges with universities. And we know that style of universities are very conservative in the way they move. So my question, how can the universities become more disruptive in the way they do business to meet the challenges and rethink the model of the university?
Oh, that's a tall question, but we'll try to answer it. I will try the first goal. You raised the question of faculty, which triggers, I think, one of the reasons why universities very often, seen from the perspective of industry, becomes a little bit fossilized. This is because faculty used to be faculty at the same place, or more or less the same place, for 40 years. And some faculty actually develop over time, but many faculty members also fossilize in their way of thinking. The inoculation against that is to have a very, very active graduate school program. Lots of doctoral students, postdocs, young brains that mix with the older brains, young brains that go to industry, and some of them are probably coming back. Unfortunately, universities cannot pay the salaries that industry pays, which is actually a hindrance for a back and forth flow. The brain flow is more from universities to industries than from industry to university because of people's economic situation very often. But I think modern universities should really consider the average age of their internal human capital. And I know universities in which the average age of the internal human capital is more than 40 or 45 years old, and I know others where the average age is 35. And it's obvious that there's a big, big difference in output, output measured as citations, patents, innovations, economy, and many other things. So the age profile, one would have to work with it in a decent way, of course, and it's not so easy. This was part of an answer triggered by your question, and I think before we take, no, Dave first, and then we have two more questions before we close.
So how can we change universities? Well, you can't do it with us picking a new committee, right? But that's how we actually have change processes in the university. A new committee gets you something a little different. You want to change a curriculum. What happens in a curriculum committee? You work really hard, and then I say it's like the siting of a nuclear power plant. Everyone wants the power, but not the power plant. In English, we call it a NIMBY problem, not in my backyard. The academic NIMBY problem is, oh, innovation is great, just don't change my course. We have, in order to change universities, we have to take change leadership seriously, and we have to do a systemic approach, but it's hard. But it's doable. So for example, this work I'm doing in Columbia, we're doing a curriculum reform. We're using agile methodologies with 4 sprints, which university professors don't usually organize themselves into scrums and sprints. We're doing design thinking to examine the personae of the students and the other stakeholders. And then we're understanding the culture, because when you change curriculum, it's not really the curriculum that's the resistor, it's the culture resists and goes back to the old form. So there's a way to do it, but it takes a lot more work than what we're used to doing and usually willing to do. If you want to do that, there are ways to do it, but you've got to, it's a significant investment to get that kind of And then underneath all of that is to build the shift skill and soft skill capacity of both your students and faculty. Can you learn to listen to each other? Can you learn to ask better questions? Can you be more aware of differences of opinion and accept those? Those are hard things, but there's good, coach training is a good model for that, and that kind of work can be done, but it's a significant investment.
I just wanted to make short comments. I agree with what has been mentioned, but I think, Omar, one of the fundamental issues, and for Saudi University in particular, is the bylaws. I think we ought to have a bylaws which will give you a significant margin to work and to take initiatives. And I'm hopefully looking forward for the university bylaws, which will be released soon. So I think you can provide the university with the support. You can have state-of-art facilities. You can have cutting-edge infrastructures, but unless you have the bylaws which will give you the chance to work with ease, probably you won't be able to accomplish a lot.
So I would like to answer to the lady that was asking about the academic freedom before. If you would wave just so that I know where you are, because I can't see you.
Up on the balcony.
Oh, there. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. There you are. You know, I think it's a really interesting question about, you know, the intellectual freedom, you know, how you can earn it, you know, because it's kind of, you know, the part that has to do with freedom of speech and things like that, you know, that is something that is embedded in the culture broadly, you know, not only in the universities. And I think that it has very much to do, you know, about how the society feels about science, you know, as a means to kind of find solutions which are good for the society. And if there is this kind of trust, you know, then the ball kind of rolls to the game plan of the academics, and then you say that, okay, you kind of, you know, the career systems and the whole system in universities is geared, you know, that you actually earn your academic freedom. So it's not something that comes automatically, but, you know, when you are going through the different steps in your career into university, you learn more and you get more merited, and your academic freedom is increasing because of your expertise is increasing. And I think that, you know, when you look at what universities are supposed to deliver, you know, you should never really go to individual professors and say that what did you actually deliver this year, but you should look at, you know, what the university as a whole has delivered this year. And then you will see, you know, how the community is working, because science is a risky business, you know, so what the academic freedom means that you sometimes need to work for 5 years with something before you get to deliver. And if you evaluate it every year, you will never get there. So you earn the academic freedom, which means that you will buy yourself a little bit more time to go into the depth of things. And a wise society will allow this, you know. So look at the performance of the university, not individual professors every year. That's too frequent.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions, and time is running out. And 2 are here, but we have first.
Thank you for answering my question, Dr. Turner.
No.
Yeah, thank you for the panelists. My name is Majid El-Nomefi. I just want to comment on the first question that's delivered by our friend from Aramco about the 4th Industrial Revolution and the relation with the academy. Since we are rethinking the university, as everybody knows that the university has 3 roles: education, research, and society contribution. Let's focus on the society contribution. The university, either is a governmental or a private one, it's running through a financial budget. So this is a constraint where the universities is working in this frame. So when we are coming to the 4th Industrial Revolution, I just want to mention that the 4th Industrial Revolution is 3 waves, and each wave have 5 components. And this is started exactly 3rd of January 2019. So the first wave is Internet of Things. and advanced analytics, cloud computing, robotics, and digital currency blockchain. The second wave started from 2016 up to 2025. Artificial intelligence, asset blockchain, smart automation, 6G communication, not 5G, future of energy. The third wave, quantum computing. I want to elaborate on quantum computing, cybersecurity, neurotechnology, nanotechnology, informatics. Now we are living in a digital age. We are living in the digital economy. The digital economy is what counts. The cyber security, what counts. Out of all the data, only 0.5 out of 44 zettabyte is analyzed. Now, the nanotechnology, it consists of a lot of things, and the research, there must be public-private research partnership, where the university and these laboratories to be work with these industries. So this has to be reshaped with the role of the university. Now in Saudi Arabia, we have 40 universities, 30 or 28 almost governmental, 11 private, and 1 special private, King Abdullah, which is not under the supervision of Ministry of Education. And now there's a post has been initiated as a Vice Minister for Universities and Research and Innovation. So where is the innovation counts in the plans of the universities? So this is the rethinking of things with the framework of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Quantum computing is a very, very big issue. China already started 2 years ahead with the quantum computing that is against the original technology, which is the microprocessing. This is a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will ask the panel to listen to 2 more quick questions and then a final quick round of comments. Phil.
Yes, Philip Altbach from Boston College in the United States. I have a question for David, which is quite a direct one, which is those people who criticize and are not optimistic about the future of the current university, what is it to be replaced with? And specifically, how do you do a couple of the traditional functions of the university, such as credentialing, in a way that will be believable and accepted by the broader society? And also, how do you deal with, at the other end of the thinking, critical thinking?
Keep your answer. Liz, do you want it? No? Okay. No more questions, unfortunately, because we run out of time. So I'll ask the panel to a quick final round. You can use any of the questions you have gotten, but please remember the 2 last speakers when you answer. So Dave first, an answer to Phil.
So,
yeah,
first of all, I want to, so I predicted, I used the analogy of, in my opening remarks, so I guess I'll close the same way. My prediction was that if universities, and of course I was being provocative, if universities don't embrace their human side, if they don't embrace practice, the universities will become zombies like in The Walking Dead. And it's because I think it's unassailable that returns to in fact, a number of people said it using different language, but returns to expertise, whether it's in the classroom or in the research lab, are diminished. And so we've got expensive institutions that have been well-funded by government for years whose returns are diminishing. So in the States, the reduction in state funding, you could say, is one way that that's showing up. So I don't think it's incumbent on me to imagine how things will continue. They'll continue, and the universities will do kind of an okay job in the things that they've always done, and people will pick at the bones. And so will a Google come along and train its own computer scientists? They certainly hired everyone in my lab, in my artificial intelligence lab. It's arguable that some of the best research in the world is already being done by the Googles and Facebooks and other companies in the world, so at least in some sectors. So it seems to me that to some extent was playing devil's advocate to get people to take the idea that practice is really important, that shifting to practice and shifting to the emotional side, the cultural side, to actually take conversation and action skills seriously and to embed them in the university so that it can change is the imperative. But I guess I have to say that it's so countercultural to a long-established tradition going back to the finding of Roman law in Pisa and the starts of what was originally a student-sponsored university in Bologna, that I'm not optimistic that we're going to adapt well. I think we're going to kind of fumble around, and that'll be the way things go.
Okay. We'll steal 2 minutes with your permission, and Tula first, then Alessandra, and you, Abdullah, will get the final word.
I will try to be very brief. I think, it's true that the technology demand in the society is going to increase. I'm not sure that it means that we need more universities of technology. I think, what was said before by Alan, is that we are actually moving towards making more comprehensive universities who can link together, the humanities, social sciences, technology, medicine, whatever you do, because the challenges we have are so big that no single discipline can do them alone. And I think that, when we talk about the responsibility of the faculty or the universities, I think the social responsibility needs to be one of the issues that we expect from everyone. And it's very difficult to do this social responsibility if you don't have the ethical issues and philosophy and things like that, in the package. And I think there are some examples of technology development where these things were not integrated and the results were not very beautiful. So I think it's very important to go towards, interdisciplinary universities where different fields meet and can complement each other.
Thank you very much. Alessandra, and then Abdullah.
Yeah, I just wanted to close.
Alessandra first. And then you.
Okay. Okay, don't worry. No, I just want to add, and I said before, technology is there. We cannot ignore it. It's a great challenge for us, but also a great opportunity to improve what we are currently doing. It's a way to communicate in a very quick way with different world. Also for the students, they can be in touch with that. But I want to come to the last Dave comment about the human factor, which is so important. So I think that university in the future will be not so different in the shaping, but it will profit about the technologies. I'm from the medical field, so I think that we cannot skip the patient having a virtual one, because patient need also the human factor, and the student needs to gain also this kind of skills, and this cannot be gained with a computer or a virtual reality. So I think this is very important. It's linked also to somehow to academic freedom, because this value which refer, and I go back to the question of the lady, I don't know where she is, but anyway, it's something that is linked, because technology and social media lead everybody to state whatever on the website, and this is very very dangerous somehow. It needs to be linked to the ethic, and so academic freedom and in the era of technology is something that is more challenging. But we need to get in mind that academic freedom is a value that is stated in the Magna Carta Universitatum. We need to protect people inside the university, because promoting discussion, even answering difficult question, is something that is really needed if we want to educate for democracy and if we want to have future leaders in society. So, yes.
Thank you very much. And now, finally, Abdullah will...
Thank you. I just wanted to close by emphasizing what I start with, the fact that among the various domains or the dimensions of university function is the single most important is the teaching and learning, and all the components of the teaching and learning, starting from the admission criterions to the curriculum design, to the teaching strategies, and even to assessment and evaluation ought to be changed to, instead of having assessment and evaluation, which is knowledge-based, has to be performance-based if you are looking for a graduate who should be ready to go to the workforce. And one more comment with the reference to the innovation, and I think traditionally we're having three functions for the university, but nowadays the issue of innovation and entrepreneurship is starting to become the fourth function of the university nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panel.